The sky above planet K-77 was the color of a fresh bruise, a deep purple streaked with the orange trails of falling ships. One of those trails ended here, in the steaming, cratered mud of the northern wetlands. Tay, an illusion scout, pulled himself from the wreckage of his graceful, bird-like ship. His silver suit was torn. One of his long, elegant arms hung at a wrong angle. The pain was a sharp, clear signal in his mind, but he pushed it aside. He had to assess. The high-vex swarm was coming. His mission was over. Now, survival was the only goal. He scanned the horizon. His ship's systems were dead. But his internal sensors picked up a low, thrumming energy signature a few kilometers east. Power source. It was crude, chaotic, and strong. It had to be the human outpost. Tay felt a sliver of despair. Humans, the galaxy's known factor, and one his people quietly looked down upon. The illusions were artists of life and form. Humans, they said, were noisy, blunt, and messy. They built ugly things that worked too well. They laughed at the wrong moments. They were, in a word, primitive. To seek refuge with them was a deep cultural shame. But the clicking sound of Vex scouts in the distance decided for him. He began to walk. The outpost was exactly as ugly as he expected. It was a blocky, gray thing they called Hope's Brink. It was made of heavy plasteel and had wires snaking along its outside walls. There were no flowing lines, no attempt to blend with the misty landscape. It looked like a fist punched into the mud. As he got closer, he saw two humans working on an external sensor array. One was a male, his hair cut short. He was tightening a bolt with a focused, calm expression. The other was a female, her hands moving quickly over a cracked screen. They wore simple, durable uniforms, stained with mud and grease. They did not look like warriors. They looked like mechanics. Tay approached, holding his injured arm. He activated his translator. "I am Tay of the Illusion Scout Fleet. My vessel has been destroyed. I request sanctuary." He used the formal word, hoping some concept of diplomacy existed here. The two humans stopped working. They looked at him, then at each other, then back at the forest. The man spoke first. His voice was even. "Jean, this is Mira." He pointed a thumb at the woman. "You're leaking blue stuff from your side. That's bad." Tay looked down. A thin, phosphorescent blue fluid, his equivalent of blood, was seeping from a tear in his suit. He hadn't even noticed. "Come on," Mira said, already walking toward a heavy door. "The Vec are about 20 minutes out. We saw your light show. Can you move fast?" Tay was stunned. No ceremony. No questions about the war, his people, or politics. Just a statement of fact and an immediate action. He followed them inside. The interior was worse. It was a cave of machinery. Panels were open. Tools lay on the floor. A constant, rhythmic thumping came from a generator in the corner. In the center of the room, two other humans were preparing weapons. A large, muscular man was feeding a belt of huge bullets into a massive gun. A woman with a calm face was lining up sealed medical packs on a table. "Day 1, Hannah," Jean said, nodding to them. "We have a guest. Illusion. He's hurt." The large man, Day 1, gave a short grunt and kept working. The woman, Hannah, came over. "Sit here," she said, pointing to a crate. Her tone was not warm, but it was professional. As Hannah sprayed a sealant on his wound, a cold, quick, and effective process. Jean stood nearby. "The swarm. How big?" "Large," Tay said, gritting his teeth as the sealant tightened. "A primary digester is with them. You cannot hold against that. This structure is not a fortress. You must evacuate." Jean shook his head. "This is the only spot on the continent with the mineral processor for our ships. We lose this, the whole sector falls. We're not leaving." "It is suicide," Tay stated, the logic clear. "Maybe," Jean said. He didn't argue. He just stated a fact back. "But it's our job to stay. You can stay in the underground bunker. It's safe." Tay felt a hot flush of shame. To hide while these crude beings fought? He was a scout, a warrior of the Illusion Crescent. His pride, damaged as it was, flared. I will not hide. My weapon is integrated into my arm. I can fight. I can show you how to make a proper defensive line. For the first time, Jean smiled. It was a small thing, not mocking but tired. Appreciate the help. But our way is already set. You can fight with us on the wall. He looked Tay directly in the eyes. Just stay out of the line of fire. Our way is messy. A loud alarm blared. A harsh, blaring sound. Red lights began to spin. Day One hefted his huge gun with a solid click. They're early, he said, his voice a low rumble. Jean slapped the side of the heavy door control. It began to grind shut. He handed Tay a small, bulky human comms unit. Channel 4. Listen, call out targets. Do what you do best. He then looked at his people. Mira by the generator, Hannah closing her medic pack, Day One heading to the firing step. Places. Let's give our guest a proper welcome. Tay climbed the short ladder to the outpost's wall, his mind racing. They were going to die. They were all going to die in this ugly, loud box. But as he took his position, looking out at the dark, shifting tree line, he felt a strange sensation. It wasn't hope. It was a dreadful, curious anticipation. He was about to see how humans fought. He readied his elegant, precise energy lance. The first clicking shrieks of the Vec Vanguard pierced the air. The quiet was over. The time before the storm was the most confusing part for Tay. He stood on the plasteel wall watching the humans prepare. He expected a solemn silence, a focused meditation on the coming battle. That was the illusion way, a moment to reflect on the beauty of existence before defending it. The humans did not do that. Day One, the large man, was not just checking his heavy cannon. He was talking to it. You are going to be so hungry soon, he said, patting the metal barrel. He laughed, a deep sound that seemed to come from his stomach. He caught Tay looking. Old girl gets fussy if you don't talk nice to her, he explained, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Nearby, Hannah the medic was laying out her tools on a clean cloth. She had rows of sharp metal clips, tubes of liquid, and a terrifyingly small saw. She worked with steady hands. And she was humming. It was a simple, repeating tune. There were no words. It was not a war song. It sounded like something a child might hum while drawing. Tay watched her place a bone clamp next to a plasma injector. The calm on her face did not match the terrible tools. The greatest confusion was Mira, the engineer. She was not on the wall. She was outside of it. Jean lowered her down on a cable and she ran, crouched, into the muddy field between the outpost and the tree line. She carried small, boxy devices. What is she doing? Tay asked Jean, who was watching her through a scope. Planting party favors, Jean said, his eye not leaving the lens. Tay's own enhanced vision focused. Mira was digging small holes, placing a device, and covering it with mud. She worked fast. Then she would run 20 meters and do it again. She was completely exposed. A single Vex scout could leap from the trees and end her. This is a terrible tactic, Tay said. She is isolated, vulnerable. She should be behind cover, preparing her mind. Her mind is prepared, Jean said. He sounded sure. Suddenly, Mira cursed. The word was sharp and loud over the comms channel. It was not a cry of fear. It was a sound of pure, hot frustration. One of her devices was flashing a red error light. She smacked it with the flat of her hand. Kept flashing. She cursed again, more creatively this time, comparing the device to a rotten piece of fruit. Then she pulled a multi-tool from her belt, opened a panel, and ripped 2 wires out. She twisted them together. The red light turned a steady green. She gave the device a final pat, buried it, and ran to the next spot. Tay was speechless. Such brutality toward a machine. Such chaotic, effective problem-solving. When Mira was hauled back up the wall, covered in mud, she was smiling. All set. The welcome mat is laid out. She took a long drink of water. She saw Tay's expression. What? They like surprises. Jean called them together for a final word. Tay stood straight, ready for a speech about duty, about the honor of the stand, about the light they would shine into the darkness. Jean looked at each of them. Right? Keep the chatter clear. Call your targets. Watch your corners. Hannah, you're in the bunker until we need you. Hannah nodded. Don't do anything stupid enough to need me too fast. No promises, Mira said, grinning. Jean continued. The big one, the digester, is the problem. If it shows up, we switch to plan B. Everyone knows their job. We do this right, we all get to complain about the food later. He clapped Day One on the shoulder. Make the big ones count. That was it. No poetry. No inspiration. Just a reminder of jobs and a joke about bad food. Tay could not stay silent. He felt a need to contribute something of his people's wisdom. Sergeant Jean, he said formally, the illusion way is to aim for the nerve clusters, the joints, the eyes. We disable with precision. It is efficient. It respects the flow of battle as a difficult dance. Perhaps I can show your soldiers. Jean looked at him for a long moment. He seemed to be considering it. Tay felt a flicker of pride. He would teach them elegance. Then Jean nodded slowly. Nerve clusters. Good to know. But with the Vec, sometimes the cluster is buried under 2 feet of chitin. Our way is Messier. He pointed to Daywin's cannon. That doesn't disable. It deletes. The goal is simple, them down, us up. However we can. The words were like cold water. Them down, us up. It was so brutally simple it felt empty. Where was the higher purpose? The respect for the opponent as a part of life's pattern? Before Tay could argue, the sensor panel beeped. A wall of red dots appeared at the edge of the screen, moving fast. The tree line began to shake. Positions! Jean barked, his calm voice now edged with steel. The humans moved. They did not take graceful positions. Day One shoved the barrel of his gun into a notch in the wall. Mira pulled a rifle from a rack and slammed a power cell into it. Jean stood in the center, raising his own weapon. The humming, the laughing, the cursing. It all stopped, but the feeling was not solemn. It was focused, a different kind of focus than Tay knew. It was not the quiet of a prepared mind. It was the quiet of a loaded spring. Tay activated his energy lance. A beam of pure, blue-white light extended from his forearm. It was beautiful. It made a soft, clean hum. He looked at the human weapons. They were blocky, ugly things of black metal and polished wood. He looked from his beautiful weapon to the ugly wall, to the muddy field with its buried surprises, to the humans with their blank, waiting faces. A deep chill settled in his core. This would not be a dance. He was not prepared for what was coming. The first Vec warrior, all sharp edges and clicking rage, burst from the trees and charged. Daywin's cannon made a sound like the world tearing apart. The sound was not a weapon. It was an act of violence against the air itself. Daywin's rotary cannon fired not in careful bursts, but in great, shuddering roars that lasted 3, 4, 5 seconds. Each roar tore the front line of the Vec charge into pieces of chitin and misty green fluid. He did not aim at single targets. He aimed at groups, at shapes, at movement. The bullets did not punch clean holes. They shredded, they mangled, they removed entire sections of the enemy. Tay fired his energy lance. A thin, bright beam shot out and struck a Vec warrior in the joint of its front leg. The leg went stiff. The creature stumbled. Before it could rise, another Vec trampled it. Tay fired again. A perfect hit to a sensory cluster on another's head. It shrieked and spun in confusion. It was effective. He was disabling them, removing them from the fight with elegance. But he was not stopping the charge. Next to him, Mira fired her rifle. It was a sharp, cracking sound. She wasn't aiming for joints or clusters. She was aiming for the soft, open mouth of a leaping Vec. She hit it. The back of its head exploded in a spray of green. She moved the rifle a fraction. Another crack. Another Vec dropped. A hole burned through its center. She was not disabling. She was killing. Fast and ugly. The wave hit the field. This was when Tay expected the solid wall of defense, the unbreakable line. The field erupted. Myra's party favors exploded. But not with fire and shrapnel. They were plasma mines. They burst upward in pillars of blue-white heat that clung to everything. Vec warriors caught in the glow didn't just burn. They melted, their hard shells bubbling and running like wax. The explosions were not timed. They were random, triggered by weight and movement. They did not create a barrier. They created a chaotic, terrifying landscape of instant death. The Vec charge, so orderly and direct, shattered into panicked, scrambling knots. It was not a defensive tactic. It was a predatory one. It was like watching an animal caught in a patch of hidden thorns. Left side, pushing through the slag. Jin's voice was calm in the comms. Tay swiveled. A group of 4 Vec, smarter or luckier, had weaved through the dying pillars of plasma and were rushing the base of the wall. Their claws could dig into the plasteel. They could climb. Before Tay could raise his lance, Daywin's cannon stopped. The sudden silence was almost as loud as the noise. In that second, Daywin grabbed something from a crate. A thick tube with a simple sight on top. He rested it on his shoulder, pointed it down, and fired. There was a whoosh. A rocket shot out, not at the group, but at the wet ground 3 meters in front of them. The explosion was a dull thump. Mud, rock, and the broken bodies of the Vec flew into the air. It wasn't the clean hit Tay expected. It was area denial, making the ground itself the enemy. A high-pitched shriek came from above. 2 flying Vec, like bony, leathery stingrays, dove from the purple sky. Their mandibles dripped with acid. Tay took a breath, aimed, and fired. His beam cut across one's wing membrane. It spiraled, screeching. The other dove straight for Mira. Jean did not shoot at it. He stepped forward, directly into its path. He raised his arm. On his wrist was a small, rectangular shield generator. He activated it. A glowing, golden energy disk, about the size of a dinner plate, snapped into existence. The Vec crashed into it headfirst. There was a sickening crack. The creature fell to the walkway, stunned. Jean stepped on its neck, pulled a heavy pistol from his hip, and fired once into its head. The movement was quick, brutal, and close. Tay could see the green fluid splash onto Jin's boots. It was all wrong. The battle had no rhythm. It was a series of violent, loud, messy reactions. The humans did not hold a line. They erupted. Day 1 was a volcano of noise and metal. Mira was a precise, cracking threat from the shadows. Jean was an unmoving rock that broke anything that touched it. Tay fought well. His blue beams were constant, each one a statement of perfect skill. He felt a flicker of pride. He was showing them the value of precision. Then the ground beneath the outpost shook. Not from an explosion. From a deep, steady thrum, like a giant heartbeat. The mud in the field bulged upward. Then it split open. The digester rose from the earth. It was a worm, but made of overlapping, rock-like plates and glowing veins of molten energy. It was as wide as the outpost. Its front end was a circular mouth, ringed with spinning, crystal teeth that glowed with heat. Where it turned, the ground didn't just melt. It vanished, eaten away into a smoking trench. The plan, the messy, chaotic human plan, froze for a single second. This was different. Jin's voice cut through the noise. It's here. Plan B. Now. He looked at Tay, his face hard. Get to the bunker. Tay stared at the monster. Illusion doctrine screamed in his mind. Strategic retreat. Evacuate. You cannot fight a force of nature. You must fall back. This is not an enemy you can kill with noise and mines. Jean didn't answer him. He was looking at Mira. The canyon. Can you lead it? Mira was staring at the digester, her eyes wide. Not with fear, but with calculation. She looked at the smoking path it was carving. Then west, toward a deep crack in the earth a kilometer away. The ground's unstable. I can make it angry. I can get it to follow. Do it, Jean said. To Tay's absolute horror, Mira slung her rifle on her back, grabbed a small device from her belt, and ran for the ladder off the wall. She was going toward the monster, not to fight it, to insult it, to get its attention. This was not a dance. This was not even messy fighting. This was madness. Tay looked at the humans, expecting to see panic. He saw only focused faces, switching to a new, more dangerous task. They were not going to fight the digester. They were going to trick it. Mira moved. She didn't jump or climb with grace. She half slid, half fell down the ladder from the wall and hit the mud running. Her path was a zigzag, away from the outpost, away from the main Vec forces, and toward the smoking trench left by the digester. Tay watched, his mind blank with disbelief. She was a small, fast figure in the gray mud, heading directly for the shadow of the colossal worm. The digester was turning its slow, grinding circle, its mouth facing the outpost, preparing to melt the foundation. Mira, you're clear on the left. Go, go! Jin's voice was tight in the comms. He wasn't watching her. He was firing his rifle in short, controlled bursts at the smaller Vec trying to swarm after her. He was cutting a path for her through the chaos. Daewon's cannon roared again, but the sound was different. It was not the long, tearing bursts from before. It was quick, hammering punches of fire. He was not aiming at the digester. His plates were too thick. He was aiming at the ground near its midsection, kicking up geysers of mud and rock. A distraction, an annoyance. Mira reached the edge of the digester's trench. The heat was immense. Tay could see the distortion in the air from the wall. She pulled the device from her belt, a small seismic charger. She didn't throw it. She armed it, took 2 steps back, and hurled it like a stone, right at the base of one of the worm's glowing crystal teeth. It was a tiny thing against the monster. It clinked off the tooth and fell into the molten mud at its base. For a second, nothing happened. The digester continued its turn toward the outpost. Then a deep, subterranean thump echoed. It was not an explosion on the surface. It was a shockwave through the earth. A small section of the trench wall, right under the digester's head, collapsed in a slide of mud and steam. The digester stopped. Its whole body, a mountain of living rock, shuddered. It did not have eyes, but its front end swung away from the outpost. It oriented on the small, muddy human standing 60 meters away, who had just thrown a rock that made the ground bite it. Mira didn't freeze. She raised her other hand. In it was a small, bright flare. She activated it. A sizzling red light burst from it, painting her face in crimson. She waved it once, a clear, bright, over here signal. Then she turned and ran, not back to the outpost, west toward the jagged crack in the earth they called the canyon. The digester let out a sound. It was a deep, grinding roar, like continents moving. It was not a sound of pain, but of pure, simple anger. It pulled its enormous body from the trench and began to move after her. The ground shook with each segment that dragged forward. It was faster than it looked. She has its attention, Jean yelled. Day 1. Keep the little ones off her. Hannah, be ready. Tay understood the plan now. It was a hunter's trick. Lure the giant into a pit. But the pit was a kilometer away, across open, muddy ground littered with scrambling Vex soldiers. Mira was fast, but the digester was relentless. And the smaller Vec were everywhere, clicking and shrieking, sensing the changed focus of the battle. Mira was halfway to the canyon when it happened. She cut around a burning patch from one of her own mines. The mud there was churned and soft. Her right foot sank in deep, past her ankle. She pulled, stumbled, and her left foot landed on a slick, buried rock. Tay heard the crack over the comms. Not a gun, a bone. Mira cried out, a short, sharp sound of surprise and pain. She fell forward into the mud. The red flare tumbled from her hand and sputtered out. She tried to push herself up, but her left leg buckled underneath her. It was bent at a wrong angle below the knee. The digester ground forward. 300 meters. 250. Myra's down. Hannah's voice was in the comms, clear and sharp from the bunker below. On the wall, Tay looked at Jean. This was the moment. This was where logic took over. The plan had failed. The bait was caught. The monster was coming. The only sensible move was to close the doors, to fall back to the bunker, to protect the ones still safe. To sacrifice the one for the many. It was a terrible, clear equation. Every military doctrine Tay had ever learned presented it. Jin's face was like stone. He looked from the fallen Mira to the approaching digester. He did not look at Tay. He did not speak of sacrifice or the greater good. He spoke into the comms. She's out there. That was all. 3 words. Not a command. Not a question. A statement of a single, unacceptable fact. The equation shattered. Day 1, without a word, stopped firing at the ground near the digester. He swung his heavy cannon around. The roar started again, but now it was aimed at the swarms of smaller Vec between the outpost and Mira. He was cutting a bloody, smoky path through them. He was not trying to stop the giant. He was trying to clear the way for something else. Hannah's voice came again. I'm going out. There was no request for permission. Tay saw the heavy bunker door hiss open below. Hannah emerged, not running, but moving with a fast, determined walk. She had a rifle in one hand and her heavy medic pack in the other. She didn't head for cover. She walked straight onto the bloody, chaotic field, toward the distant figure of Mira. Jean saw her go. He didn't order her back. He simply raised his rifle and began firing with deadly precision at any Vec that turned toward Hannah. He was her shield. Tay stood on the wall, his energy lance cold and useless at his side. He watched the humans break every rule of warfare. The mission was no longer hold the outpost. It had changed in a heartbeat. The mission was now get Mira. The digester was 150 meters away, its glowing mouth opening wide. The calculus was clear, but the humans were no longer doing math. They were doing something else, something Tay did not have a name for. He felt a deep, cold shame wash over him. He was just standing there, watching. The giant worm was almost upon her. Shame burned in Tay's chest, hotter than the digester's glow. He was a warrior. He stood on a wall of safety, watching a crippled ally be rescued by others who were now in terrible danger. The illusion way valued the group's survival, the logical choice. But watching Jean fire without pause, watching Daywin's cannon blaze a trail of fire, watching Hannah walk calmly into hell with a medical kit, it made the logical choice feel like a stain on his spirit. He was not human. He did not understand their madness. But he was here. He had fought beside them. That had to mean something. His ship was dead, but its core might still have a flicker of power. A last trick. An illusion trick. Jean, he said over the comms. My ship's projector can make a light. A big one. Maybe 10 seconds of distraction. Jean didn't look at him. He fired 2 more shots. Do it, was all he said. Tay turned and scrambled down the ladder. He ran across the compound, through the open bunker door, and into the wrecked field where his elegant ship lay broken. The cockpit was a mess of cracked glass and silent screens. He shoved his good hand into a service port, feeling for the manual override. His fingers found the connections. He closed his eyes and sent a command through his neural link, demanding one last surge from the dying power cell. On the field, Hannah was halfway to Mira. The smaller Vec were closing in, despite Daywin's wall of fire. The digester was 100 meters away, its grinding roar filling the world. Above the broken ship, the air shimmered. Then, a giant image burst into life. It was not a weapon. It was a thing of impossible beauty. A perfect, 3-dimensional hologram of an illusion starbird. Its wings a mile wide, made of swirling nebulas and brilliant stars. It was a sacred symbol of his people, a sign of hope and transcendence. It was the most beautiful thing Tay could make. To the Vec, it was a sudden, shocking blaze of light and impossible movement in the middle of the battlefield. The creatures shrieked. Their simple minds, tuned for heat and movement and vibration, did not know what to do. Many stopped, clicking in confusion, their attention ripped from the running humans to the dazzling, silent bird in the sky. 10 seconds. Tay counted them. His hand fused to the burning hot port inside his ship. The power cell screamed in protest. For Hannah, it was enough. She reached Mira. She didn't hug her. She didn't speak soft words. She dropped to her knees in the mud, her rifle laid beside her. She pulled an auto-injector from her pack and jammed it into Myra's thigh. Myra's cry of pain cut off, replaced by a sharp gasp as the painkiller hit. Hannah's hands then went to the leg. They were steady, fast. She pulled a flat brace from her pack, slid it under the broken shin, and slapped it. The brace hissed, wrapping itself tight and rigid around the injury. "Can you stand on the right?" Hannah asked, her voice flat. "I can hop like a champion," Myra said through gritted teeth. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "Good." Hannah stood, pulling Myra up with her. Myra slung an arm over Hannah's shoulders. Hannah grabbed her rifle with her free hand. They turned back toward the outpost, a clumsy, three-legged run. The starbird flickered and died. The beautiful light was gone. The power cell in Tay's ship gave a final spark and went dark forever. The Vec shook off their confusion. The digester, annoyed by the fading light, refocused on the two humans now stumbling away from it. 80 meters. Its mouth began to glow brighter, heating up for a blast that would vaporize them. On the wall, Jean saw it all. Day 1. The head. Now. Day 1 shifted his aim. The rotary cannon stopped firing at the ground troops. He aimed the massive barrel at the digester's face. He fired. The bullets didn't pierce the thick crystal teeth. They shattered against them, filling the air with screaming shards and sparks. It did no real damage, but it was like throwing sand in the eyes of a giant. The digester flinched, shaking its head side to side. The molten blast delayed. It bought 3 more seconds. Hannah and Myra were 30 meters from the outpost wall. The main gate was still shut. There was no time. "Jump!" Jean yelled down at them. He and Day 1 dropped their guns. They leaned over the wall, arms outstretched. Hannah and Myra didn't hesitate. They didn't look at the monster behind them. They ran the last few steps to the base of the wall. Hannah boosted Myra upward. Jean and Day 1 caught Myra's arms and hauled her, screaming in pain, onto the walkway. Hannah jumped, her fingers reaching. They caught her wrists and pulled her up just as a wave of blistering heat washed over the back of the wall. The digester's molten breath hit the plasteel where they had just been standing. The metal glowed red and began to drip. They were up. They were safe on the wall. But the digester was now at their gate. It was angry. It was done chasing. It began to press its glowing, spinning mouth directly against the outpost wall. A smell of burning metal filled the air. The wall shrieked in protest. In a minute it would burn through. They had saved Myra. But now the monster was here to eat their home, and them with it. Jean looked at the burning wall, then at Myra's pale face, then at Hannah, who was already checking her patient. He looked at Day 1, who was slamming a new ammo belt into his cannon, knowing it was useless. He finally looked at Tay, who had just run back onto the wall, his hand blackened from the burned-out ship. "Plan C," Jean said, his voice tired but final. "Everyone to the generator room. Now." They fell back into the heart of the outpost. The generator room was hot and loud. The thumping machinery felt like a dying heartbeat. The air smelled of oil and fear. Outside, a deep, grinding screech screamed through the metal as the digester ate into the wall. Jean went to a console covered in dust. He didn't type in codes. He pulled a simple metal key from a chain around his neck and shoved it into a slot. He turned it. A section of the floor slid open. Below was not a weapon. It was a large, heavy machine bolted to the bedrock. It looked like a giant speaker, pointed down into the planet. "This was a survey tool," Jean yelled over the noise. "For finding deep minerals. Sends a pulse. A sound. We turned it up." Tay stared. They were going to sound at the monster? It was absurd. Sonic weapons are for crowd control. That thing is made of rock and magma. "No," Jean said, his eyes hard. "We're not aiming at it." He pointed a finger straight down. Tay understood then, and the understanding was worse than any fear of the Vec. They were not going to fight the digester. They were going to fight the world it stood on. Day 1, hold the door, Jean shouted. The big man planted himself at the entrance to the room. His cannon pointed down the smoky hall. The smaller Vec would be inside soon. Hannah propped Mira against a wall, checked her brace, and picked up her rifle to stand beside Day One. They would hold the line for a few last minutes. Jin's hands moved over the old console. He flipped large switches. Lights flickered on the machine below. A low hum joined the thump of the generators, a deeper sound that vibrated in Tay's bones. Outside, a section of the outer wall collapsed with a thunderous crash. The digester's head, ringed with spinning, glowing teeth, pushed into the compound daylight. It sensed them in the core. It began to drag its immense body forward, carving a path of ruin straight toward the generator room. Jin's hand hovered over a final, red lever. He looked at his people, not with sadness, with a question. Day One glanced back, gave a sharp nod, and fired a burst down the hall. Hannah nodded too, her face calm. Mira, pale and sweating, lifted her hand and gave a shaky thumbs up. They were ready. Jin's eyes met Tay's. The illusion was frozen, his mind screaming at the insanity. They were going to trigger a geological event. They might bury themselves. They would certainly bury the outpost, all for a chance to kill the monster. Tay thought of his beautiful, useless ship. He thought of the starboard hologram, a symbol of hope that lasted 10 seconds. He thought of Mira running into the field, of Hannah walking out, of Jean changing the mission without a second thought. He was not one of them. He never would be. But in that moment, he did not want to be illusion. He wanted to be someone who tried. He gave a single, stiff nod. Jean pulled the lever. For a second, nothing happened. Then the hum became a thrum. Then a deep, shuddering groan. It was not loud. It was not an explosion. It was lower than sound. It was a feeling. It was in the teeth, in the stomach, in the roots of the hair. The concrete under their feet crackled with fine lines. Dust rained from the ceiling. The machine was not attacking. It was asking the planet a question in a voice of pure force. The digester, halfway across the compound, felt it. It stopped its forward grind. The deep vibration traveled up through its rock-plated body. It was a sensation it knew, the shift of tectonic plates, the groan of continental shelves. It was a sensation that meant danger. Tried to turn, to burrow, to escape. Outside, the canyon a kilometer away, the canyon Mira had tried to lead it to, was the weakest point. The deep sound wave hit the fault line in the cliff walls. It was a precise, terrible note. The world answered. The ground did not explode. It unfolded. A great crack shot across the compound, splitting the earth from the canyon all the way to the outpost gate. The digester, caught over it, shrieked a grinding, mineral scream as the bedrock beneath it collapsed. It fell into a suddenly vast, dark pit, its glowing body tumbling end over end into the planet's depths. The crashing, grinding noise of its descent went on for a long, long time. But the outpost was on the edge of the collapse. The floor of the generator room tilted violently. Tay was thrown from his feet. He saw Day One grab Hannah as she slipped. Jean held onto the console. Mira slid across the floor until she hit a wall. With a final, deafening roar of tearing metal, the entire front half of the outpost, the wall, the gate, the mangled buildings, sheared off and slid into the new chasm. The generator room, the bunker, and a small piece of the back wall were left, hanging over a smoking abyss. Then silence. Not true silence. There was the moan of wind over a fresh wound in the world, the hiss of steam from broken pipes, the ping of cooling metal. But the guns, the grinding, the roaring. It was over. Tay pushed himself up. His body ached. The humans were doing the same. Day One helped Hannah up. Jean staggered over to Mira, who was breathing hard but gave a weak smile. Told you. The canyon was unstable. They were alive. They stood in the ruin of their home, on the edge of a grave they had dug for a god. Tay looked at their faces. They were not celebrating. They were checking on each other. Jean put a hand on Daywin's shoulder. Hannah started rechecking Myra's brace. Tay walked to the jagged edge of what was left of the wall. He looked down into the deep, dark crack in the planet. Somewhere far below, a faint, dying glow of magma was fading. He finally understood. The human's weapon was not the sound. It was the will to use it, The will to pull the lever that could break the world, not out of hate for the monster, but out of love for the person next to them. It was the terrible, awesome truth of them. They would not accept a universe that took one of theirs. They would rather make the universe itself scream. That was the sound deities dreaded. Not the crash of planets. The simple, unbreakable promise behind it. The silence after the battle was a heavy thing. It was filled with the small sounds of a broken place. The drip of water, the creak of strained metal, the low groan of the wind crossing the new chasm. The air smelled of burnt rock and ozone. Tay stood at the edge of the broken floor, looking into the dark. His mind was quiet. The clear, logical pathways of illusion thought were gone, replaced by a deep, humming understanding he could not yet name. Behind him, the humans moved. Hannah was already working. She had Mira propped up more comfortably and was giving her water from a canteen. Day One walked slowly through the rubble of the room, picking up a fallen tool here, a half-crushed ration box there. He was not searching for treasure. He was taking stock of what was left. Jean stood by the dead console, one hand still resting on it, looking at the ruin of his outpost. No one spoke of victory. After a while, Jean turned. His face was tired and covered in gray dust. He walked over to Mira first, kneeling beside her. "The leg hurts like fire," Mira said, her voice thin but clear. "But it's straight. Hannah's a wizard." Jean nodded. He looked at Hannah. "I'm fine," she said. She was not fine. Her hands had small cuts and she was breathing a little too fast. But her voice was steady. It was enough. Jean stood and walked over to Day One. He didn't ask anything. He just put a hand on the big man's arm. Day One stopped his searching and looked at Jean. He gave a short, slow nod. "We're low on the big shells. Plenty of small stuff." That was all. Finally, Jean came to stand beside Tay at the edge. He followed Tay's gaze into the abyss. They stood together for a long moment. "You fought well," Jean said. His voice was rough. "For a poet." The old words should have insulted Tay. They did not. They felt like a gift. A true name. Tay turned from the chasm to look at Jean. He saw the man clearly for the first time. Not a primitive. Not a blunt instrument. A leader who had just broken a world to save 4 people and an alien he barely knew. "Your people?" Tay began, the words strange in his mouth. "They will say this was a waste. That the outpost is lost. That the cost was too high for no gain." Jean looked back at the room. At Day One sharing a piece of a nutrition bar with Hannah. And Mira trying to laugh at something. "They might," he said. He looked at Tay again. "What will your people say?" Tay thought of the starbird, his last beautiful lie. He thought of the perfect, disabling shots that did not stop the tide. He thought of the moment he chose to burn out his ship's heart for 10 seconds of light. "They will say I have learned a terrible thing," Tay said softly. "What's that?" "That your strength is not in your weapons," Tay said, the understanding finally forming into words. "It is in the promise. The promise that you will not be left behind. That you will not be alone. That is the gravity you have. It bends everything. Even logic. Even survival." He looked at the cracked ground. "Even the ground itself." Jean was quiet for a while. "It's not always pretty. It's messy. People get hurt." "Yes," Tay said. "It is the messiest thing I have ever seen. And the strongest." He looked at his own hands. One was elegant, long-fingered, made for delicate control. The other was blackened and burned from the ship's core. He felt the weight of a decision settle on him. He could go back to his people. He could tell them of human madness. Or he could tell them of human will. He picked up a human rifle from where it had fallen on the floor. It was heavy. It was ugly. It was solid. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its simple, brutal purpose. "Next time," Tay said to Jean, his voice stronger now. "Next time, my people will need to learn your way." Jean looked at him, really looked at him. He saw the burned hand, the dirty silver suit, the new light in the alien's eyes. He offered a tired, genuine smile. It reached his eyes. "It's messy," he warned again, as he had on the first day. Tay hefted the rifle, getting used to its weight. He looked from Jean to the others, the wounded, the tired, the unbroken. He thought of the sound that broke the canyon. Not a sound of hate, but a sound of refusal. The refusal to lose. Yes, Tay said, and for the first time, something like a human smile touched his own strange lips. It is.